Noura Erakat is a human rights attorney and associate professor at Rutgers University. You're joining us from Philadelphia. Thank you for coming on the program. 52 countries are slated to present arguments in this case. Never before in the history of the International Court of Justice have we seen as many countries line up to weigh in on a matter of international law. What does that tell you?
It tells us that the U.S. remains out of step and politically isolated as it continues to try to protect Israel from international accountability in order for Israel to continue to expand its settler colonial enterprise, in order to evade accountability under international law that mandates that it return refugees to their original homes and lands, that it end its occupation, that it cease its genocide in the Gaza Strip. And yet here we see the United States exercise its role as global superpower to impede the role of international law in order to achieve what is an international consensus on this matter.
I'd like you to listen to the words of the U.S. representative when he was submitting arguments. I'll read them out to you, and then we'll listen to them. The court should not find that Israel is legally obligated to immediately and unconditionally withdraw from occupied territory. Let's listen, and I'd like to hear your response on the back of this.
The court should not find that Israel is legally obligated to immediately and unconditionally withdraw from occupied territory. The court can address the questions before it within the established framework based on the Land for Peace principle and within the parameters of established principles of occupation law.
So this made me, really sit up in my seat. I wondered whether I'd heard that properly. I'm not even sure what to ask here, but how can you argue against withdrawal from occupied territory?
Well, I'm not going to make this argument on behalf of the United States. I want to contextualize why the U.S. is doing this. Since Israel's occupation in 1967, the U.S. has talked out of both sides of its mouth. On the one hand, affirmed that occupation, that Israel has a duty to withdraw from the territories, and on the other hand, facilitating Israel's settler colonial expansion, increasing its settlement enterprise, increasing the number of its settlements, so much so that its Land for Peace framework that he mentions here has been used as a weapon against international law. We heard this in 2004 in the ICJ advisory opinion when Tom McLennan described that advisory opinion on the illegality of the route of the wall as an impediment to the peace process. We continuously hear the United States, even yesterday, vetoing a ceasefire as an impediment to a negotiated peace. We are continuously hearing the United States tell us that international law on water, on land, on borders, on refugees, on the end of genocide is an impediment to ending all of those conditions that are illegal. And yet at the same time, rather than using politics in order to stem those conditions, is using its political power in order to enable Israel to continue those violations. And so we should understand the United States here as part of the problem, which is politically isolating itself in matter and in fact.
Why isn't Israel also standing up here and presenting its oral arguments?
This is the par for the course for Israel to want to delegitimize the process altogether. In its submission, it described the course as biased and tendentious, rather than actually deal with the substance. It wants to undermine the entire forum so that it doesn't have to deal with the actual argumentation. If Israel were there, it would make an argument that really sounded like it was from outer space by arguing that the territory is not occupied at all. Israel has contended that there is no sovereign, that Palestinians are not a people, therefore it has no duty to withdraw, to revert the territory to a sovereign that did not precede its occupation, and instead this is disputed territory, and they can continue to settle it in what the Fourth Geneva Convention would describe as an outright war crime. And so I think to avoid that embarrassment and actually dealing with this matter, it instead tries to kill the messenger altogether.
Human rights attorney Noura Erakat, thank you for joining us in the program this hour.
Thank you for having me.
In the last few hours, Benny Gantz, a member of Israel's war cabinet, has been outlining what officials within the government have been discussing. Willem Marks has more on those developments from occupied East Jerusalem.
Well, this was an attempt, seemingly at a press conference by the former head of the Israeli military, former defense minister here in Israel, a man that has joined with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to help form this so-called war cabinet. It was an attempt to answer some of the most pressing questions about things like aid. He said that there would be more aid flowing into Gaza. He also said, though, that the long-term objective was military and security control of the Strip. He talked about issues around the military objectives of the Israeli army needing to be met inside Gaza, but that at the same time, and this is a real contradiction at the heart of what's going on here in society in Israel, there was the possibility he held out that there would be another prisoner exchange agreement not too far in the distant future. And one of the huge concerns of the Israeli public is that these hostages get returned to their families, and it's something that many people increasingly publicly are saying will be made that much harder by the kind of aggressive action that the Israeli military has been taking inside Gaza. He reiterated the idea that the Israeli military would launch a focused ground incursion inside Rafah in the south of the Strip in the weeks to come at the start of Ramadan. He said also, and this is one other thing, that they would continue to fight against Hezbollah forces in the north of the country. They would continue, though, he said, until security is restored to the residents there.